What if everything you own today suddenly became worthless? Not because it disappeared, but because no one accepted money anymore? No coins, no paper, no banks, no digital payments, just people, their skills, and whatever they could carry. Strange as it sounds, this was once the reality of every human being on Earth. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived without a single coin in their pockets. They built families, hunted dangerous animals, crossed continents, raised children, and created entire communities without ever buying or selling anything in the way we understand today. Yet somehow, their societies survived, and in many ways, they thrived. Money feels so natural now that it's difficult to imagine life without it. We use it to measure success, security, and even time. But money is one of humanity's newest inventions. Before it existed, people had to answer a much more difficult question. If nothing has a price, how do you decide what anything is worth? The answer begins long before the first cities appeared. Imagine a small group of hunter-gatherers waking before sunrise. There are no markets waiting for them, no shops, no wages. Breakfast doesn't come from a purchase. It comes from yesterday's hunt or today's effort. Every meal depends on cooperation. A skilled hunter may return carrying fresh meat. Another person knows where edible roots grow beneath the soil. Someone else gathers berries, repairs tools, or watches the children while others search for food. Nobody receives a paycheck. Instead, survival itself becomes the reward. This wasn't simple generosity. Anthropologists believe early humans relied heavily on sharing because no individual could survive alone for long. A successful hunt could feed dozens of people, but tomorrow the hunter might return empty-handed. By sharing today, everyone increased their chances of receiving help tomorrow. In a world filled with uncertainty, generosity became a survival strategy. But that raises another mystery. If people shared everything, did ownership even exist? The answer is surprisingly complicated. While food was often shared, many personal tools belonged to individuals. A carefully crafted spear, a stone knife shaped over many hours, or a necklace made from rare shells carried personal value. These objects represented skill, effort, and identity. Losing them wasn't just inconvenient, it could threaten survival. Even then, humans understood that some things were worth protecting. As populations slowly grew, another challenge appeared. Groups began meeting strangers. Trading within your own family is easy because everyone knows each other. Trading with someone you've never met is much harder. Why should you trust them? Why should they trust you? Long before money, trust became humanity's most valuable currency. Imagine two neighboring groups meeting beside a river. One group lives near forests filled with strong wood perfect for making spears. The other lives closer to rocky hills rich in high-quality stone. Neither has everything they need. Instead of fighting, they exchange resources. Wood for stone, animal hides for sharp blades, dried meat for colorful shells. This was barter, but not always in the simple form we imagine today. Modern stories often describe barter as someone trading one chicken for 3 baskets of fruit. Real life was usually far more flexible. Many exchanges happened over time. One group might provide food today, expecting help months later during a harsh winter. There wasn't always an immediate trade. Sometimes the debt existed only in memory. This depended on something remarkably powerful: reputation. In small communities, everyone remembered who shared and who refused. Those known for fairness received support when they needed it most. Those who constantly took without giving risked becoming isolated. Long before written contracts, your reputation was your credit score. As human societies expanded, another fascinating problem emerged. What if the person with grain didn't want your animal skin? This became known much later as the double coincidence of wants. For barter to work perfectly, each person had to want exactly what the other offered at the same moment. That rarely happened. Imagine trying to exchange fish for pottery, only to discover the potter already had enough fish. Now what? Humans needed something more flexible. Surprisingly, the first solution wasn't metal, it was relationships. Many early societies relied on systems of obligation rather than immediate payment. Gifts created invisible connections between people. Giving someone a valuable object wasn't always charity. Sometimes it created a lasting social bond. Anthropologists studying traditional cultures have found that gifts often carried an unspoken expectation. Not immediate repayment, but eventual balance. A gift could say, "Today I help you." Tomorrow, perhaps, you'll help me. Entire communities were held together by these invisible networks. In some cultures, refusing a gift could even be considered an insult because it rejected the relationship itself. This changes the way we think about wealth. Perhaps the richest person wasn't the one who owned the most things. Perhaps it was the one surrounded by the most trustworthy relationships. As thousands of years passed, humans settled into permanent villages. Farming transformed everything. Hunters followed animals across vast landscapes, but farmers stayed close to their fields. For the first time, people produced surpluses. One family harvested more grain than they could eat. Another raised more goats than they needed. Others became specialists. Instead of growing food themselves, they made pottery, woven cloth, jewelry, or tools. Specialization increased productivity, but it also increased dependence. Now, people needed regular exchanges with strangers they barely knew. Barter became more common, but its limitations became impossible to ignore. Imagine carrying sacks of wheat through a crowded village, hoping someone would exchange them for sandals. Even if someone agreed, how much wheat equals one pair of sandals? And what if the sandals wore out faster than the grain spoiled? Determining value became increasingly difficult. Different communities experimented with remarkable solutions. In some regions, beautiful seashells became widely accepted because they were rare, durable, and difficult to fake. Elsewhere, polished stones, beads, feathers, salt, tea bricks, copper objects, or even livestock served similar roles. These weren't money in the modern sense, but they were moving closer. Each represented something many people agreed had value. One of the most famous examples was salt. Today, it's an ordinary seasoning sitting quietly on kitchen tables. Thousands of years ago, salt preserved meat before refrigerators existed. Without it, food spoiled quickly. Entire trade routes developed around this simple mineral. Some historians believe the word salary is connected to ancient payments associated with salt, although the exact history remains debated. Whether completely true or partly legendary, it reminds us how essential everyday objects once became. Meanwhile, another silent revolution was unfolding. Writing. As cities grew larger in Mesopotamia, keeping track of exchanges became increasingly complicated. Who owed grain? Who delivered wool? Who borrowed livestock? Instead of carrying physical goods everywhere, people began recording debts. A mark pressed into wet clay could represent a promise. Incredibly, some historians argue that systems of recorded debt may have existed before widespread coinage. In other words, the idea of credit may actually be older than money itself. Think about that. For much of history, people trusted written promises before they trusted metal coins. Eventually, powerful kingdoms recognized an opportunity. If rulers produced standardized pieces of precious metal with official markings, everyone could immediately recognize their value. Around the first millennium BCE, the first true coins began appearing in several regions, including the Kingdom of Lydia in western Anatolia. These coins changed commerce forever. Instead of arguing endlessly over value, people now shared a common standard. Trade accelerated. Markets expanded. Empires grew. Yet something remarkable happened. Even after coins spread across civilizations, many people continued living much as their ancestors always had. In remote villages, neighbors still exchanged favors. Families still shared harvests. Communities still relied on trust. Money didn't erase cooperation. It simply added another tool. Looking back, it's tempting to imagine ancient people as economically primitive. But the evidence suggests something very different. They solved incredibly complex problems without calculators, banks, or digital networks. They built systems based on memory, honor, reciprocity, and shared survival. In many ways, these systems demanded more social intelligence than modern transactions. Today, buying a loaf of bread takes only seconds. You may never meet the farmer, the miller, the truck driver, or the baker. Money connects strangers instantly. Ancient humans didn't have that luxury. They had to know people. They had to build trust. Every exchange strengthened, or weakened, the fabric of their community. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson hidden in the history before money. Civilization wasn't built because humans invented coins. Coins became possible because humans had already invented something far more valuable: cooperation. Long before the first currency was minted, before banks counted wealth or markets set prices, our ancestors discovered that survival depended on sharing knowledge, honoring promises, remembering kindness, and trusting one another. Money transformed the world, but it did not create humanity's first economy. That economy was built from relationships. And in many ways, every transaction we make today still carries a quiet echo of those ancient exchanges around a fire, where the greatest wealth anyone could possess was the trust of another human being.